Geoffrey Chaucer, the father of English literature in the 14th century, described the knight as a worthy and wise man with a gentle nature. However, if we look behind the scenes of history, we see a completely different picture. A real knight often looked untidy. His clothes were covered in stains and worn out by heavy chainmail. The idealized image of a noble warrior who never utters a foul word was more of a poet's dream than a reality. Chaucer himself served as an esquire in his youth and knew the grit of their daily lives from the inside, though he ultimately chose a career as a writer and astronomer. If you thought knights were the embodiment of politeness and did nothing but protect the weak, I have bad news for you. In reality, they were professional fighters whose appearance and behavior were dictated by the harsh conditions of endless wars and long campaigns. Their courtesy was largely a successful PR campaign created centuries later. To make sure you do not miss the truth about other historical myths, subscribe to the channel and hit the like button right now. It really helps us create high-quality content. Meanwhile, we are heading back to the origins to understand how this privileged class actually came to be. The history of knighthood has its roots in antiquity, when the horsemen of ancient Rome and Greece began to turn into a separate caste. In Europe, this class was born thanks to ordinary and often poor men who were hired to protect lands from enemy raids. The bravest among them were rewarded with land and influence. This is how personal bravery gradually turned into a hereditary title. A huge role in the development of knights was played by Charlemagne, the ruler of the Franks. His military success largely depended on horsemen who could fight without leaving the saddle. This rapid development of the cavalry was made possible by the introduction of stirrups, which allowed warriors to maintain perfect balance in the heat of battle. Knights did not just appear out of nowhere in the 11th century. The path to this class began much earlier, starting with the ancient Greek horsemen known as hippies and the ancient Roman equites. Over time, these mounted fighters turned into a privileged layer of society with immense political influence. In medieval Europe, the situation was similar. Initially, these were simple, often quite poor men hired by rulers to protect territories. Those who showed exceptional courage in battle were rewarded with land grants and high status, which eventually began to be passed down through the generations. A special boost to this class came during the era of Charlemagne from the Carolingian dynasty. This ruler relied heavily on cavalry, which allowed his state to reach impressive sizes. Interestingly, back then, manners were quite simple, and rulers received very blunt nicknames. History remembers Louis the Stammerer, Lothair the Lame, and Pepin the Hunchback. There was even Charles the Fat and Charles the Simple, although the Latin meaning of the latter suggested directness and honesty rather than a lack of intelligence. In those years, no one was afraid of hurting someone's feelings. If a monarch had physical traits, it was immediately reflected in his name. It was under Charlemagne's grandson, Charles the Bald, that an important decree was signed, officially securing knightly land holdings for their families. Thus, the border defenders turned into hereditary landowners. Another factor in the rise of knighthood was the constant Viking raids. To ensure 24-hour protection of the borders, monarchs gave lands to warriors as full property, creating entire dynasties of professional defenders. However, a title and land were not enough to become a formidable force. The true power of these warriors was granted by a small but revolutionary piece of equipment, without which it would have been impossible to fight effectively on horseback. In the 8th century, an event occurred in Western Europe that changed the face of war forever. We are talking about the appearance of stirrups, a simple but brilliant invention that came from Central Asia. Without this detail, it is impossible to imagine the development of heavy cavalry. It was the stirrups that helped the knight maintain perfect balance during the most difficult maneuvers. When an opponent is charging at you with a lance and arrows are flying at your face, staying in the saddle without a reliable footrest is almost impossible. Thanks to this technological novelty, the warrior gained the ability to use both hands for combat, turning into a kind of living, armored vehicle. Charlemagne's cavalry became an invincible force, precisely because the riders could now deliver crushing blows while practically becoming one with their horse. This was a true revolution in the physics of combat. All the momentum of the charging animal was now transferred to the tip of the lance. In his heavy, multi-kilogram armor, a knight became almost invulnerable to the infantry of that time. However, the whole of society had to pay a high price for this military superiority. Outside the battlefield, these perfect war machines became a serious problem. When active combat died down, yesterday's defenders, who possessed immense physical strength and a habit of violence, became completely uncontrollable. Rudeness, cruelty, and a total lack of discipline in peacetime forced lords and the church to seriously fear for their safety. This perfect military power required strict rules of behavior. Otherwise, these steel giants could destroy the very society they were meant to protect. In the early stages, knights were very far from the romanticized image we know. In essence, they were mercenary fighters whose behavior often caused horror. As soon as they climbed onto a horse in their heavy gear, these men turned into an overwhelming force that knew no mercy. In peacetime, their aggression often spread to those around them, including civilians. The clergy at that time even called them servants of dark forces rather than defenders of the throne. Knights could be extremely rude and cruel to those who stood lower on the social ladder. It was the desire of the elites to protect themselves that led to the creation of a code of conduct. This was an attempt to tame dangerous warriors and ensure the military functioned properly. However, stories of total nobility should be taken with a grain of salt. Most tales of heroes without fear and reproach were created by poets who never actually participated in battles. In reality, courtesy was shown only to noble individuals, while common people often faced violence. Even in the heat of military campaigns, knights committed harsh acts, especially against foreigners. Over time, the relationship between warriors and the church grew stronger, which became especially noticeable during the Crusades. The religious focus helped direct their wild energy into an organized channel. To finally discipline the warriors and highlight their status, exclusive societies began to emerge. One of these elite organizations became the most prestigious in English history, and its creation is linked to a romantic and somewhat funny story involving a woman's garter at a ball. Knightly orders emerged as a powerful alliance between the church and warriors. Organizations like the Hospitallers or the Teutonic Knights initially pursued the goals of protecting pilgrims and liberating lands. However, the most legendary and prestigious was the Most Noble Order of the Garter, founded by Edward III in the middle of the 14th century. Its appearance is shrouded in romantic myths. According to legend, during a dance with the monarch, the Countess of Salisbury lost a part of her outfit, a garter, which caused laughter among the courtiers. The king picked it up and uttered the phrase that became the motto, "Shame on him who thinks evil of it." Since then, this saying in French has decorated the order's coat of arms. This exclusive group can have no more than 24 members, not counting the monarch. Interestingly, the core members had to be exclusively English. Scots, or those born in Northern Ireland, were not allowed into this inner circle. Nevertheless, there were honorary members, including the Russian Emperor Nicholas II and the Japanese ruler Hirohito. The latter was stripped of his title in 1941 when his country entered a global conflict against Great Britain. But 30 years later, Elizabeth II restored his rights. Membership in such a community was considered the peak of recognition, but the path to the coveted title was incredibly long and grueling. To one day enter the circle of the chosen, boys had to start their training as early as age 7. This multi-year process was like a brutal survival school, with conditions 100 times tougher than any modern army. A future warrior had to go through all the steps of a complex hierarchy before proving his right to be called a knight. The journey to becoming a knight began at age 7, when a boy received the status of a page. During this period, he learned the basics. He practiced riding, cared for horses, and used wooden models instead of real weapons. At 14, the youth became an esquire, and this was perhaps the most dangerous and responsible stage of training. A squire was required not only to look after his master's armor, but also to accompany him into real battles. It was the squire's job to carry a wounded knight from the thick of the fight, which often resulted in the assistant passing away on the battlefield before ever receiving his own title. Besides weapon training, future heroes were taught court etiquette, dancing, and literacy under the guidance of the clergy. One had to be able to speak eloquently in French and Latin, dance, and hold sophisticated conversations so as not to be embarrassed in front of the monarch. If all the tests were successfully passed by age 21, a formal knighting ceremony took place. The young man became a full-fledged professional warrior, ready to serve a baron or a king. However, war did not happen every day, and their massive energy and thirst for glory needed an outlet. To stay in shape and earn money in peacetime, warriors came up with a legal alternative to battle: large-scale competitions. At first, these tournaments were more like unorganized mass brawls than noble sports, and were a truly brutal test of strength. Knightly tournaments, which began in France, initially looked very little like noble contests. They were mass fights, where groups of warriors beat each other senseless. Many passed away right on the field before the finale. However, the risk was justified by huge rewards. The winner took the armor and horses of the losers. The legendary William Marshall made a fortune on such fights in just 2 months, even though he started with almost nothing. The church disliked these games because warriors wasted their strength instead of participating in the Crusades. Over time, the rules became stricter, and tournaments turned into an exciting show featuring beautiful ladies. Henry VIII was a huge fan of this sport. In his youth, he shined in the arena, but 2 heavy falls changed everything. After a serious head injury in 1536, the monarch's character became unpredictable, and a leg injury robbed him of the ability to move properly. As a result, the king reached a weight of over 130 kilograms. His armor from that time still amazes people with its size, especially the prominent part, the metal codpiece. Women believed that touching this part of the gear or sticking a pin into it would help them with childbearing. However, tournaments were just a bright facade. Behind the festive arena, a warrior's daily life consisted of discipline and exhausting labor. A knight's ordinary day, when hundreds of eyes were not watching and ladies were not applauding, was governed by a strict training schedule. A typical day for a knight began at dawn with prayer, followed by breakfast and hours of exercise. Training was grueling because a full set of armor weighed between 20 and 30 kilograms. To practice strikes, warriors used wooden mannequins or poles driven into the ground. and training weapons were specially made heavier than combat ones to build muscle. One of the most difficult training tools was a rotating pole with a crossbar. A rider had to hit a shield with a lance at full gallop and instantly dodge a heavy bag that would swing around and strike him with full force. Knights were incredibly athletic and agile people, capable of complex maneuvers while encased in steel. After refueling at lunch, time was dedicated to social education and hunting. Tutors taught the warriors to express themselves correctly in French and Latin, to dance, and to hold worthy conversations. Hunting served as excellent practice, helping them maintain alertness and accuracy in any environment. In the evening, the knight attended court feasts, where music and socializing ended his day. Before bed, another prayer followed. This was a life of strict discipline and physical labor that made them the true elite of their time. This was a golden age. No, like all great things, knighthood began to fade when gunpowder appeared on the battlefield, changing the rules of war forever. The decline of the Age of Knights was inevitable due to technological progress and changes in society. The first and main reason was the emergence of regular armies. It became easier to recruit ordinary soldiers, and their mass training was much cheaper and faster for the state. The second crushing blow was the development of firearms. Gunpowder and bullets changed the game on the battlefield forever, as lead easily bypassed the protection that riders once relied on. The third reason was the gradual move away from feudalism. Maintaining professional heavy warriors became too financially burdensome, and the practice was eventually abandoned. The knights who remained either became courtiers or took high positions in the new regular armies, using the experience of their ancestors. But although the era of steel armor has long passed, its memory lives on. Knighthood has transformed into legends, movies, and our modern ideas of honor. Today, the concept of gentlemanliness originates from the codes created centuries ago. Being a knight today is not about being able to wear 30 kilograms of iron, but above all, about inner nobility and honorable actions. Thank you for watching this deep dive into history until the end. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video so you don't miss new investigations. If you want to learn even more interesting facts, 2 other cool videos have appeared on the screen right now. One about the hidden secrets of kings, and the other about the details of daily life for an ordinary person in the Middle Ages. Pick either one and click. They are both very interesting. This was Eva Carter. See you in the next episode. Bye!